Hey guys, it's Kevin again, my review for the latest new series on HBO that everyone seems to be talking about, and that is for the first season of Euphoria. And what Euphoria is essentially about is we center on our main character, Rue Bennett. She is this recovering drug addict. She's just recently returned from rehab, and things are just really not going that well for her. That is until she stumbles upon this girl, Jules, who she kind of finds this kindred spirit into, who kind of inspires her to start her recovery process and hopefully try to kick the habit and things like that. And along the way, we follow a bunch of Rue's circle of friends and the various dilemmas that they're really dealing with, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Euphoria Season 1, I was very excited for this show. I mean, just knowing that HBO was doing a show with A24, that alone had me very excited, but also seeing the cast that was on board. I mean, Zendaya is someone who I've been very impressed with lately, and I was very excited to see what she was going to do here. There's other cast members here that I've seen popped up in things before, and I've really liked them, but I don't really feel like they've gotten that big, star turn, so I was excited to see what they would do here, but at the same time, I was also very conflicted because it is by Sam Levinson, who did one of the most overrated films of last year, Assassination Nation, which I really did not like very much at all, and I was I was hoping that he would be able to improve himself upon that, because I really did not think he did that great of a job with that film, so I was a little bit hesitant with that, but I have to say, pretty much from the first episode, Euphoria absolutely floored me. This is such a well-done and thought-provoking show that is probably one of the most realistic portrayals of high school, but also of addiction that I've seen in a very long time, and we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And that is definitely one of the things that absolutely anchors this show. I think really every single actor here is fantastic. There's not a single weak performance in the bunch here, and everyone does a fantastic job. But easily the star of this whole show is Zendaya, who blew me away, I have to say. Look, I always knew that she was a very talented actress, and I've always really liked her of things I've seen her in. I really liked her in the Spider-Man films. I've liked her in The Greatest Showman and things like that. But trust me, you have never seen her as good as she is in this show. She completely transforms into Rue Bennett, someone who, again, she is very focused on trying to get over this addiction and things like that, and she's trying to do what she can to do that, but she also is very damaged. She clearly has some sort of disorder, which we kind of find out at the end of the season, but we're also kind of unsure of it. So she's struggling with that, and just all of the emotions that Rue is feeling, you really are there with her. She's in this constant state where she is trying to get over what she's doing, and she's sort of replacing Jules as her addiction for that, and I think she just did such a phenomenal job, especially scenes that require her to be in this very just euphoric state, or this state where she's supposed to clearly not be, where she's very heavily intoxicated, or she's done drugs and things like that. She does such an incredible job in the show. The range she has, I truly did not know she was as capable of as I thought she was, and after the show, I mean, I'm pretty clear, I think I'm pretty confident saying she is probably, out of all the Disney Channel stars I've seen, she has easily had, I think, the best turnout for sure. I adored everything about her in the show. She gives one of the best performances of the entire year, and I absolutely loved what she did here. She was absolutely phenomenal in this show. There's one scene especially with her just banging down a door, and you can just see the desperation in her. This is someone who, even though she's trying to kick that habit, she is very highly addicted, and I think Zendaya just does such a great job with embodying that, showing how, for people that are drug addictions, they kind of need it, and I think she just did such a fantastic job in the show. All of the various emotions of Rue, it's a very complex character, and it can be very hard for someone to take on, but Zendaya does it with flying colors, and I absolutely love what she was able to do here. But someone else who very much deserves being talked about is Hunter Schafer as the character of Jules, who I really haven't seen in anything before, but I really do hope I do after the show because she is such a fantastic actress here. I love what she ended up doing. Jules is someone who is very quiet, but she also is very damaged. There's clearly some, from the first episode, there's clearly some sort of past that she's been involved in, and we don't really know what's going on there, and she really does do a great job with that for sure. You're very intrigued by her, but she also feels very pure and innocent in that way, and I really did like what we got out of her in this show for sure. And the chemistry between her and Zendaya, these two are just absolutely magnetic. You really do feel for these two. You're rooting for them to work out as friends, and maybe even more than that, and I think they do a really great job for sure. Again, I really have not seen too much from her, but she absolutely killed it, and I think she's definitely one of the big standouts here for sure. And then as far as the rest of the cast goes, everyone else does such a fantastic job here. Someone I have to talk about is Jacob Elordi, who, similar to Joey King in The Act this year, proved to me that I have vastly underestimated him as an actor. I mean, here he's playing this character, Nate, who, yes, on the surface is kind of a piece of shit, but honestly, Elordi just does such a great job with transforming himself into this sometimes very terrifying character who also you kind of do empathize with in a way, which I'll get into with the writing, but he did a really great job, and I really want to see him do more roles like this and less of whatever he was doing in things like The Kissing Booth, because I really liked him here for sure, and I thought he did a really great job. There's other actors here that I've always really liked, like Alexa Demie, who has a lot more to do as the character of Maddie. I thought she was really great. Sydney Sweeney, I thought was fantastic as this character, Cassie. I really loved her here. Barbie Ferreira, sorry if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, but she did a really great job as this character, Kat. Storm Reid even gets to pop up, and she does some great work. Algee Smith is really great. Maude Apatow. I mean, really everyone does such an incredible job here. Like I said, I don't think there's a single actor here that isn't at the top of their game. The ensemble just works so well together. Everyone just feels so real. Nobody feels like, you're watching these actors and you can point out that they're just these actors. No, they really do transform into these characters, and that's one of the best things I can say about this cast is that they're just so game for this show, and that's always great to see, and that's one of the best things about it for sure. It's just... But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because like I said, going into the show, that was actually the thing I was most worried about, and again, similar to, my fears of certain actors, pretty much from the first episode, I really didn't have any worries. I think Sam Levinson really went out of his way to make this as realistic and as grounded of a show as he possibly could, and I think he really needed a TV show. Like, his type of vision doesn't work for just a 90-minute movie. He needs something longer than that, and it very much does show here, because I think his style was definitely one of the best things about this entire show. He really does care for these characters, and you very much do see that. He puts a lot of care into it, and he really does a great job with portraying a very realistic environment. Yes, the show is very dark, and it is very uncomfortable, but he does have some nice balances of levity in there. There are moments where, you can laugh and things like that. I mean, the character of Lexi especially, she does get some good laughs out of you and things like that, and I think they did do a good job with that. It showed that Levinson, he wasn't trying to portray this superficial version of high school. No, this feels like if you were to go back to high school and step in, it's eerily similar, and I thought his tone was very well done here, but also just the dark subject matter that he's covering, he handles it in a very sensitive way, and I think his directing was just very well done here. He very much proved to me that he is very much a talented director, and again, similar to Jacob Elordi, I vastly estimate him, and I'm very excited to see what he does from here on out, because this very much proved to me that he is definitely talented, and I kind of feel bad for bad-mouthing him last year, for sure, because he did a great job here. But the writing is what really engrossed me into the show because, yes, I'll just get it out of the way. This show is very hard to watch. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. It's very uncomfortable. It tackles some very dark subjects for sure. And I've heard a lot of people, because of that, compare it to 13 Reasons Why. And I feel like this is a very unjust comparison because while 13 Reasons Why was very much about the effects of suicide and what this can do to people and why someone would make that decision, this show isn't really about that. Instead, it's about how teenagers operate and the various things that they go through. I mean, it tackles a lot of things like sex and things like that, but not in the way that most teen shows do. It doesn't try to portray it as something glamorous or something that is, you know, fun. It portrays it as just, this is something that teenagers engage in, and a lot of them engage in it because, not necessarily because they want to, but because they feel like they have to be accepted in that way. You know, this is a regular thing for them, and I think they do a really great job with that for sure, and that's something that was very well tackled. And also the idea of acceptance in general. That's another big theme throughout this entire show. All these characters, you know, they want to feel accepted. They want to feel like they can fit in. And that can cause them to go off the rails a bit. And that can cause them to make some really irrational decisions. But unlike most teen shows, every decision these characters make, they do have some kind of consequence. There's a lot that these characters go through within this first season. It's just really refreshing to see. This is not your CW type show where they'll drink or they'll do drugs and there's like no consequences whatsoever. That's something that always kind of did frustrate me with those shows. I mean, it's something that I was able to get behind because I knew how those shows were done, but for a while that would bother me. And this show, that's not the case. I mean, the things these characters do, there are very much consequences for them, and I think that's definitely very well done here for sure. But it really is these characters and how well written they are that really are the thing that I think really does elevate the show. I mean, every single character here feels so well fleshed out and so well written. A lot of that is due to the way the show is structured, which, without really getting into anything, our main character, Rue, she very much is the main focus of the show, but she also serves as this omniscient narrator in a way, where every single episode will get like a 9 or 10 minute vignette, essentially, exploring just one character of the show. And by doing this, we're able to cover a lot of ground, and you would think that, oh, that's not enough time, but they really do a great job with centering on this character, giving us pretty much everything we need to know about them, whether it's Jules and exploring the difficulty she had with being accepted by her family because she wanted to transition and things like that, or it's with Kat and how she, you know, had this relationship with this boy and now she is starting, you know, now she's starting to, you know, experience things more sexually and things like that, and she's trying to explore more areas of that kind of thing. Or it's with Cassie, who has always felt like she, you know, doesn't really think that highly of herself and just lets a lot of people take advantage of her and things like that. And it just gives us a really nice window into who these characters are. And that can be very hard to do when you're dealing with so many different characters. But most of these characters feel very three-dimensional. They don't feel like these stereotypical beings. Even characters like Nate, who, yeah, he is very much the villain of this show. He is definitely a bit of an asshole. I mean, that's kind of being generous because, yes, he is not a good guy at all. He is very toxic. He is someone who is very manipulative in that way, especially what he does, you know, as the season goes on and things like that. But at the same time, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. They give you enough in there, not necessarily to justify his behavior, but make you understand why he doesn't view what he's doing as a bad thing. And those are the best kind of villains. And this show does an excellent job with that. And it's rare that you can say that for a character like Nate, but they really do give him a lot to really explain, like, okay, this is why he is so urgent, and this is why he is acting the way he is. And I think they did a really great job with that for sure. So yeah, the characters here are very well written. All of them really do feel very well fleshed out in that way. And I found myself each episode getting attached to more and more characters as the show would go on. In fact, there were times where I was always worried, like, oh, is this going to be the character that isn't as well fleshed out? But no, I end up really liking that character. And because of how well done those vignettes were, it was something where I almost every single episode, I was looking forward to them. Like, I was really excited to see what they would do, how they would top the next one. And it seemed like every episode they would kind of do that. And it's definitely one of the best things about this show. You know, a lot of shows, they try to revolve the whole episode around one character, but this show realizes that you don't really have to do that. As long as we have, like, the basic idea of, like, what this character is going through and give us just that baseline, it makes a lot of their motivations and a lot of their decisions up to that point a lot more understandable, and it makes them feel a lot more well realized as characters, and I think they did a really great job with that in the writing here. Take Cassie, for example. This is a character that I really didn't think I was going to like all that much because, you know, from the beginning of the show, this is someone who is very much slut-shamed. She has been with many different guys. You know, there's been tons of nudes of hers that have leaked, but she doesn't really seem to care all that much about it. And I thought this would just be a character that, oh, she's just a slut and she's okay with it, but they do a lot to show, like, why she really does feel this way. And she becomes a lot more than that, and I think they do a really great job with that here for sure. Or a character like Kat, for example, someone who is slightly overweight, but that has nothing to do with her character, which is so refreshing to see. Or Jules, someone who is trans, but that's not really a huge part of her character, and that's just really great to see with a show like this. You know, most shows, that would be the main thing they're dealing with. Kat would be struggling with, like, body image, or Jules would be struggling with her being trans and people not accepting her, but that's not something that these characters are dealing with. They've dealt with it before, but it's not something they're dealing with at the moment, and that's just really great to see. It shows the show is not concerned about creating these false narrative and putting these characters into boxes. No, they're trying to write real people, in a sense, and they do a really great job with that here for sure. Also, I've heard a lot of people complain about the way the show depicts sex and things like that. And yeah, there is a lot of nudity in the show. The show does definitely showcase a lot more in that department than you would expect in most teen shows. But you know what? It makes sense because, you know, when people are having sex, they are going to be naked. And the show is not doing it in a way to entice you. It's not trying to do it in a way that feels gratuitous or exploitive. No, it's trying to portray it in a very raw way, and I feel like by showing what they do here and not shying away from that stuff, one, it shows that they are willing to go there. Two, it just feels more real. It doesn't feel like there's anything that they're hiding. In fact, there are little behind-the-scenes things they would do with these characters after every episode, and one of the things that Hunter Schafer and Zendaya brought up is that these actors had to be naked emotionally, but also physically with each other, and by being physically naked, you know, there's nothing that they really aren't comfortable with in that sense, and I think it really does heighten everything in that way, and it just feels very raw in that sense, so I don't really feel like that's a justified complaint. Yes, it is definitely shocking, but it never comes across as shock value. It comes across as this is how it would be if this were to happen. Because again, the show's trying to be very real in that way, and I think they did a really great job with that here. So I don't really get that complaint at all, to be honest. Even Fesco, this character that is this drug dealer, you would expect for him to go in a villainous direction, but no, this is someone that genuinely does care for Rue, and someone that really does want to help her in that way. He recognizes what he's doing is bad. He recognizes that he's on the wrong side of things, and again, it just shows how realistic the show is trying to go about these characters. You know, Fez is not just this stereotypical drug dealer who's just bad and things like that. Like, no, he really does care for Rue, and he wants her to get out of this situation. I really like the way they approached even characters like him here. And instead, we have characters searching for things that are far more relatable, like them trying to find their identity, or them exploring their sexuality, or them trying to deal with trauma. And that is never more present for our main character, Rue, who, like I said, this is a very difficult character. She's someone who, yes, she is very highly addicted, but she herself is convincing herself that she's over it, and by doing that, she kind of replaces her addiction with her addiction addiction for Jules, and it's very interesting the way they go about it, because on one hand, you want this relationship to work out. These two have a real connection. There are a lot of things these two do bond with. You know, Jules also has been through a very traumatic past and things like that, and you see that Jules really does care for Rue. But Rue, on the other hand, is someone who very much is an outcast in that way, and Jules is also kind of an outcast, and they're trying to come out of their shell a little bit. But at the same time, Rue is clearly rushing into this, and I think they do a really great job with telling that story and showing how Rue is kind of using Jules not as someone that she genuinely cares about, because I do think she cares about her, but she's using it as a way to get over her drug addiction. And it felt very real in that way. You know, a lot of people who are drug addicts, they don't want to confront their real issues. They want to move on, but they don't want to, you know, accept the fact that they're still damaged. And that's something that Rue herself is very much going through here. The idea that she herself is better, you know, she's recovering, she's getting over it, and you know she's going to crack eventually. You know there's going to be something that pushes her over the edge. So you're just kind of waiting and seeing her just walking on these eggshells and just waiting for her to just completely just flip out. And I think they do a really great job with the writing of her character. They handle every subject, but especially the addiction, in such a sensitive and very realistic manner that it becomes really hard to watch, but you're also really engrossed because of how well written these characters are. And that's something I think is so great about this show, is that they put those characters first. They're not focused on just messages. They're focused on these characters, and I think that's something that the show does such an excellent job with. So yeah, the writing here is pretty spectacular. Where it ends up going, especially in the first season, it goes to some really crazy places that I'll talk about in the spoilers. Don't worry. Don't you worry about it. I will definitely talk about it in the spoilers for sure. But there were many directions that genuinely did shock me. I was not expecting them to go to the places that they did. And anytime I was worried about a place they were going, particularly one plot twist I really wasn't okay with at first, it went to a place where it made a lot of sense, and I think they did a great job with that. So I was very impressed with the writing here. The cinematography on the show is on another level. There are not many shows that are styled in the way that this one is. This is a highly stylized and very specific kind of show, and it makes sense because a lot of the show you are viewing it through Rue's eyes, and Rue is someone who a lot of the time she does get very disoriented, and she definitely does go off on tangents and things like that, because again, she does have some kind of disorder. You know, she has some sort of mental, she has some sort of mental illness, and there are times where you really are put into that, and because of that, the show gets to play around with its style, with its aspect ratio. I mean, there is literally, episode 6 of the show, there are many sequences that are styled as if it's like a detective kind of show, and the way they do that is so clever, and I think that's a great way of keeping a viewer invested, you know, and that's something that the show does such a great job with, is by playing up with these different aspect ratios, it keeps us more invested into what's going on, but it also definitely does heighten the tension for sure. Episode 4 of this show in particular, that whole episode is styled completely differently from the rest of the show. There's a lot of like camera tilting and things like that. It's really cool the way they do it, and I really did love the cinematography here. It's a very specific kind of look, but it really does work for this kind of show, and it's definitely one of the best things for sure, and I absolutely love it. It's something that, you know, A24 is behind this, because it's something that only they would do, and I love that, the cinematography is the way it's done here. The score as well is fantastic. Labyrinth is someone who, you know, I've liked him as a composer and things like that, but he blew me away here. There are so many memorable just cues and things like that that I was always very much looking forward to. It really does suck you in that way, and it's one of the best scores of the entire year, easily. I think it's some of the best music I've heard all year, and I think he definitely did a really great job. And the editing of this show is only 8 episodes long, but it definitely is the right amount, for sure. They did enough here where it didn't really feel like they needed to do any more, because it feels like a lot of it is very well fleshed out. It feels like they do a really great job with introducing things, but also setting up a lot of where we're going in the second season. And I think the way the show is edited was definitely very well done. Like I said, there's a lot of really interesting things they do with like the aspect ratio and things like that, and a lot of that is due to the way the show is edited. Sometimes the show can feel quite choppy, and I've heard a lot of people complain about that, but I feel like that's kind of the point, because Rue is someone who, she herself is very choppy. In fact, she admits in the beginning of the show that she is not a very reliable narrator, and there are a lot of things that she clearly does kind of forget, and we're kind of viewing the show through her eyes. So the editing being choppy, I don't really think that's an issue. I feel like that was a deliberate choice, and I feel like it works for this kind of show, and I feel like that was definitely the right choice for sure. Now, in terms of flaws for this show, because of how well written and how fleshed out everything is in this show, and how well this show does pay tribute to all those various subjects, as I said, the show never really there's not really a lot of flaws that I have with this show. If I did have to have one, though, it is that while I do think almost every character is well fleshed out, there's one character I really did not feel like got enough to do here, and that's the character of McKay. And for me, look, I really did like Algee Smith in this role, but what we get with McKay, there is an episode that's devoted to him, that's episode 6. It was the only time in the season where I didn't really feel like we'd learned anything that new about this character that we didn't already know. And that's the only time I felt that way. All of the other ones, like Cassie's and Maddie's and Nate's and Jules especially, I felt like we got to learn a lot more about those characters other than what we have seen. And his was the only one where not only did I not really feel like we got to know a lot about him, I was kind of confused with how we're supposed to feel about him. There are decisions made in the last 3 episodes of the show that I just had a hard time latching on to his character and really trying to figure out the direction that they're going with him. So while I think almost every character is fleshed out, he is the only one that is just a little bit confusing to fully latch onto. But now I really do want to get into spoilers, because there is a lot to talk about for this show. So if you have not seen the first season, please watch it right now. It's all on HBO. Cannot recommend enough. And definitely, I think something that will probably heighten your expectations for it. Like, I think people are going to have a certain expectation of the show, and I feel like watching this show, it'll probably just fade away once they start it. So let's just get into it. The first thing I think I really want to talk about is where they end up going with Nate as a character. So, as I said before, there was one plot twist that I wasn't really on board with, and that was the idea that Nate was Tyler, and that he was, basically texting Jules, and he was trying to, he was texting Jules and disguising himself as this boy Tyler that she clearly was attracted to. And at first I thought they were going to go in this direction where, he shames her for it and things like that, but then they really start to hone in on the idea that he himself is sexually confused. There are scenes he has with Maddie where those two are having sex, and she starts to notice things that he doesn't seem as into it, or he has all these pictures of various male genitals on his phone and things like that, and clearly she starts to get a bit weirded out. And so clearly he's doing this because he is kind of attracted to Jules, and he hasn't really had this experience before. So by disguising himself in this way and knowing that Jules is attracted to Tyler, it for him gives him that sense of, experimentation. It's something that he hasn't really done before, and he's kind of intrigued by that idea. So that moment where he is talking to Jules, and clearly he's talking down to her, telling her, you distributed child pornography and things like that, while you can look at it and say, okay, yeah, he's being a piece of shit, and he's being really unreasonable, and he's just very toxic, which, yes, he is, you can also see it as he is determined to do whatever he can to protect himself. You know, he doesn't want to admit that he did something like this. He doesn't want to admit that he was engaged in a relationship with her. So he's trying to do whatever he can to cover his tracks in that way. And especially when we find out that his father also has some really weird sexual history, clearly is like a pedophile or something like that. I mean, I don't think it's something like that. I think it's pretty clear. Like they definitely label him as a pedophile at the end of the season. You know, clearly he's trying to cover his and his father's tracks in that way, because clearly people are already onto his father, and he doesn't want to try to ruin that, and that makes it so much more interesting. That's one of those things where it could have just been something as one note as he was just weirded out by what she did, or he was just going along with it because he wanted to humiliate her, and a lesser show that would be his motivation, but his motivation here is not that simple. His motivation here is that A, he is clearly turned on by it and kind of intrigued and wants to go about it, but B, he's also trying to protect him and his father's legacy, and he's trying to protect it from, you know, it's erupting into something much bigger. And you see it almost does. I mean, the FBI is almost on him, he almost gets arrested, but he uses that guy Tyler that, yes, he was you know, Maddie was underage when they had sex, but Maddie was all for it and things like that. So while Tyler is kind of, you know, still Tyler is at fault because it was statutory rape in that way, he did not do all the things that Nate was accusing of, but knowing that he already has created this narrative that Tyler is this terrible person, he uses him as a way to get him out of his situation. So again, that's the way they're able to take this character and make you understand his motivations. Again, it's not justifying what he's doing, but it's getting you to understand who Nate is. It's getting you to understand why he takes the course of action that he does. You know, he wants to continue having this relationship with Maddie because he does genuinely care about her, but he's also sexually confused, and he's not as into it because he needs to explore his sexuality more. And I'm interested in seeing really where that is going to go in season 2, especially since we see his last scene in the show is him like beating up his father, and you can tell that his father is clearly afraid of him. You know, he does not like what his father is engaged in, and he kind of wants to, you know, he doesn't want to and he knows that he can't sully his reputation because he doesn't know what his father is going to do and the blowback he's going to have. But you do very much see how his father is afraid of him in that way. And I'm interested in seeing really where that story's going to go. There's a lot we don't know about Cal, clearly. And I'm excited, but I'm also scared to really get into that because there's a lot of really disgusting stuff going on there. And I'm interested in seeing how the show does tackle it for sure. But like I said, Nate's a character that could have been just a real toxic piece of shit, but they really did make him something a lot more three-dimensional, and that's one of the reasons I appreciate the show as much as I do. But another character I thought was going to go in a really predictable direction was Kat. I thought Kat was going to go in a direction where, you know, she just goes down this down spiral and things like that, but that's not at all the direction she goes. And instead, yes, she does have sex. It is uploaded to, you know, Pornhub and things like that, but she's actually okay with it. Like, she likes the fact that people are commenting, and she kind of likes this gratification in that way. This, to her, is a sign of, you know, people noticing her, and she starts to take advantage of the fact that she wants to be a cam girl. But I like the fact that this doesn't fix things for her. You know, this doesn't go in the direction where Maddie and Cassie and all them, like, they're happy that she's doing this. No, they hate the fact that she's doing this. They feel like she doesn't have respect for herself in that way. It's made her feel a lot more dominant, but it hasn't really fixed her. So the scene where Maddie is telling her, like, you know, I miss the old Kat, and you can see this does actually get to her, and you see that she is trying to make a change for herself. I think even though she has, you know, constantly just turned down, you know, that guy that likes her, I think she genuinely does want to do something. I think she herself was just holding herself back because she wanted to be dominant in that way. You know, she wanted to just explore sexually, and she didn't really want to she didn't want to commit herself to anything. But I think that scene at the end kind of confirms that no, she is going back to that old cat because she doesn't like what she's become. She knows the danger of what could end up happening here, and that's a great example of how it definitely does have a consequence. You know, she doesn't just become a cam girl and everything's okay and her friends are okay with it. No, they are worried about what this is going to do to her, and I think there is still a blowback that could happen there. You know, if that falls into the wrong hands, I mean, who knows what could really happen there. So I actually really loved where that story ended up going. Same with Cassie, who, again, I thought for sure she was just going to be like this slutty girl, but then we get that great episode with her where Rue talks about how she didn't really think that much of herself, and she kind of let guys take advantage of her in that way, and she's been okay with it up to this point. But then once she has that pregnancy scare and is realizing that, holy shit, she's pregnant, and McKay is just telling her that, you need to get an abortion, you need to get an abortion. Cassie does go through with the abortion, but she realizes that she doesn't need McKay in her life. McKay is not someone that respects her. McKay doesn't want to just have a conversation. He just wants, he wants sex constantly, and she's not okay with that anymore. She finally is turning him down, and I really liked the way that was done. It's a really great progression for Cassie and her harkening back to when she was ice skating and thinking back to times when things were just a lot simpler in her life and things that she actually liked doing. I think is showing that Cassie is going to start taking some sort of, she's going to start taking responsibility for herself, and she's going to start taking control of her life in that way. And I'm excited to see where that ends up going, and I think that was definitely a really great progression for sure. I also love the fact that Maddie did break up with Nate because, again, it's showing that these aren't just girls that are going to just let these guys take advantage of them. No, Maddie's realizing that Nate doesn't treat her very well. He abused her that one time, and sure, he's not abusive, but he did, he scratched her that one time on her neck, and that's something that she hasn't forgotten, and then all of these things have just been escalating, and it's made her realize that this isn't a healthy relationship. She needs to get out of it, and I like that these characters went there. A lot of teen shows, they would do this for seasons, but no, these characters are already out of these very unhealthy relationships, and I like where they're going there. It shows that they're on the process of recovery, and I think a lot of Season 2 is going to be characters like Maddie and Cassie and them bonding over the fact that they're out of these relationships, and now they're going to try to move forward and, take control of their life in that way, and not just let them settle for guys that clearly don't respect them very much, and I'm excited to see where that ends up going. But even the reveal where we find out that Cassie's ex-boyfriend Daniel is the same Daniel that has been taking an interest in Cassie lately, that could have gone in a really, predictable direction where they do, a love triangle, but no, we realize, no, this guy's just a piece of shit, and he's, neither of them need him. They're better off without someone like Daniel, and I like that they went in that direction, because they could have done something really cliche, but it was refreshing that, no, they just made him a guy that is just not good for either of them and brings out the worst in them, and I really like seeing that here. Another complaint I think a lot of people are going to have, but one that isn't mine, is that the character of Lexi, Maude Apatow's character, just isn't very well developed this season. We know that she is formerly Rue's best friend. We know they had some kind of fallout, and we know that she is clearly kind of in her sister's shadow. She doesn't have as much going on. Her sister's the one that's recognized not a lot, and that's kind of it. We don't really get a lot with her, but I didn't really have a problem with that because clearly that's not what this season's focus is. There's still a lot more we can get with Lexi, and I think they're going to tread a lot of that ground in Season 2. So I don't really have a problem with the fact that Lexi very much did fade into the background this season because we still do get some really great moments between her and Rue. In the Halloween episode especially, there were some really great moments there. So I really think they did enough with her. We got enough here where she felt like, okay, that's enough for this character. It didn't feel like she faded into the background to where she didn't have anything to do. It's just this season's focus they weren't really telling her story. But I'm sure because the season got a season 2 and things like that, we'll get a lot more time to flesh that part of the show out. And I think after that, I hope people stop complaining, because I really don't think that is a huge issue here. Really, like I said, it's just McKay who wasn't as well fleshed out, considering that him and Cassie's relationship was such a focal point of season 2. That is a legitimate complaint, whereas Lexi wasn't a huge focus of this season, so I don't really have a problem with the fact that she didn't really get her own episode yet. But of course, the main stuff you want me to talk about is what the hell the finale with Rue really did mean. So this is what I'm going to say. So, you know, a lot of people have been having this theory that, oh, Rue's been dead the whole time and things like that. And I really don't think that's the case. One, an omniscient narrator, the definition is just, this is a character. This is not necessarily a character in the show. This is just a narrator. It doesn't really matter that they know all this stuff. That's just how an omniscient narrator works. So I don't really think that is, you know, I don't really think that implies that she's dead and she's saying all this from beyond the grave. I do very much think she's in like a comatose state though, and the way things went about with Jules is not at all the direction that, I mean, I think we were expecting it to go, but not in the way that it does end up going. Because, you know, throughout the season, Rue starts to see Jules exhibit just questioning behavior, whether it's episode 6, where she's just constantly drunk and things like that, and she's really starting to act irrationally, and you see her really acting on her feelings for Rue and all that kind of stuff. Or in episode 4, where we know that Jules has been humiliated by Nate, and that's when Nate was telling her that he was Tyler and things like that, and so she kissed Rue, maybe not because she genuinely loves her, but because she needed someone to care about her, and she needed Rue in that moment. And so you're kind of wondering, does Jules really reciprocate those feelings? And you realize that, yeah, she does. She very much does care about Rue in that way, and I like the way that they do, depict that for sure. But right when it seems like things are going to work out for Rue and Jules, and these two are going to be together in that way, and Rue, you know, says that she's going to incriminate Cal. She even has Fez, you know, go after Nate, but that doesn't end up going well for him, who I kind of feel like Fez is going to die. I mean, that moment where he goes to, you know, like the dealer and things like that at the end, I kind of feel like he might end up dying. Like, he said, you know, am I okay? And you see the look on that dealer's face. That is not a look of pride. That is not a look of someone who is happy with what he's done. No, that is not a look of admiration. That is a look of disappointment. And I don't know if Fez is really going to survive, but you think it's all going to work out. You know, she plans on running away with Jules. But then at the last moment, she thinks of her family, and she thinks of what she's done to her family and what this is doing to Gia. As we know, Gia's starting to act out, and Rue has had to kind of, you know, babysit her in that way and hold her back from doing those questionable things. And I don't think that's enough. I think Gia's going to continue to act out because, well, Rue's been able to do it. And even though Rue has told her not to, I feel like that's just going to fuel Gia to do it even more. And you know, she knows what she's done to her mother. It's really put a strain on those relationships in that way. You know, this is not at all a healthy relationship. And she's realizing that while she does care about Jules, she's very much been using Jules as a distraction, and that she can't go down this path because it's just going to lead to more worse things. And she knows she needs Gia. She needs her mom. She can't just abandon her life, and she just ends it right then and there. And then we get to the ending, and a lot of people are wondering what it's really about. I think it's pretty obvious that Rue is relapsing. We saw forms of withdrawal in episode 7. We know, obviously, what it's done to her. I mean, there was literally that scene where, like, the bottles were talking to her, so clearly, you know, she needs those drugs, and I think it's pretty obvious that she is relapsing. She's probably, you know, she's really reflecting on her life in that way, and I think that last scene with her father and things like that, I think she's definitely in some sort of comatose state. Maybe she's in critical condition, but I do not think that she's dead. It would not make sense for Rue to have this epiphany and realizing the error of her ways, and then for them to just kill her off. I don't think that's the direction they're going in. I do think there's a good possibility that Rue is in the ICU for a good amount of season 2. I can very much see them doing something like that, but I do not see them killing her off. It wouldn't make sense if they went in that direction. That being said, I don't really know where season 2 is going to go. I think there's a lot of places they can go with it, but I don't really know where they're going to go with it. I think a big part of it, like I said, are all of these characters recovering. You know, Kat realizing that she might want a legitimate relationship with this guy who wanted one with her, or Cassie and Maddie trying to find, you know, good guys who genuinely do care about them and don't just want them for sex and things like that and don't take advantage of them easily, or Nate exposing his father and him coming to terms with his sexuality because clearly he's confused, or Jules, you know, maybe figuring out how she really does feel about Rue. Does she really love Rue in the way that Rue loved Jules, or was that superficial in that way? And I'm excited to see the way they go with that. I mean, there are so many places they can take the show. Or Fez, I mean, is Fez dead? I think there's a good possibility he might be. I'm not really sure, but either way, I really love where they ended up going in this finale. I think it was definitely a very hard-hitting one for sure, but it really did get the message across in that even though Rue said that she was fully recovered, I mean, Maddie said it best. She was in rehab 6 months ago. You're not just going to recover that easily. That's not how it works. And I think they did a really great job with showing that here. You can't just kick the habit that quickly. And that's something that Rue unfortunately had to realize here. And I think that is a very good reason as to why she's not dead. And sure, while that might be a realistic, you know, outcome for characters like that, I don't think that's where the Rue character is going. I think moving forward, she herself is going to realize that it is a long process and it's going to be very strenuous and it's not going to be easy, but she's going to try to take it. She's going to try to start recovery and maybe she'll end up bouncing back. Who knows? But I'm excited to see where it ends up going. I'm also terrified to see where it ends up going because I don't really know where things are heading. And I think overall, I'm just very excited to see where they do end up taking things in season 2. There's a lot of stuff they did here that I wasn't expecting, and I'm very interested in seeing where they end up going with it for sure. So overall, guys, Euphoria blew me away. This is a show that I was expecting to be very typical. I was expecting for it to be one of those shows that starts off strong. I kept waiting for it to fall off a cliff, but it really never happened. This is a show that just portrays every single subject with this sense of sensitivity. It really does do a good job of getting us to care about these characters, and then once it puts themselves in these, you know, really awful situations, we are more on board with it and things like that. The vignettes really do help it as well. The ensemble is one of the best the entire year. Zendaya especially gives one of the best performances I've seen in anything this year, and I cannot wait to see what she's going to do next after this. The cinematography is a very dynamic look to it. It's just overall has all the makings of a really great show. It's one of the best shows I think HBO has put out in quite a while. It's definitely entered my top 5 for sure. It's for sure going to be in my best summer shows and maybe potentially even my favorite shows of the year list. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's definitely a show that I grew to love pretty quickly. It's one I cannot recommend enough, and I'm definitely going to give Euphoria overall an A. Definitely check this one out if you haven't yet, guys. It is for sure, I think, going to be one of HBO's biggest hits in a while. I know they hit like gangbusters when it comes to the ratings, and that's great to see because HBO, as of late, I feel like they've been disappointing a lot of people, so it's great to see a show that pretty much is universally acclaimed. I know we had Chernobyl and things like that, which don't worry, guys. I will definitely be getting to that one very soon for sure. I still have to finish that one, unfortunately, but it's great to see a show that has gotten so much universal acclaim like this, and that's really it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this season overall. Left your thoughts on it. Where do you think it's going to go in Season 2? We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.